And just really the reason for organising this webinar was to reach out to you really and offer support. We've got our campaign, which is hashtag a little bit more at home, which we're offering kind of links and resources to keeping people active and connected during this time. Thanks, Mark. And really we wanted to obviously reach out and offer support through the webinar. There is the Sport England hashtag Stay and Work Out campaign as well, which it very much complements. And we've got Niall and Tina on the line tonight as well, which has been invaluable in the first session. There was a lot of questions around particularly the community emergency funding. So it was great to have them on the line to answer any questions that people had. We want to understand really almost areas that you possibly need more support with. Something that came up in the previous webinar was around business planning. A clubs forum was kind of welcomed as well, and we talked a little bit about digital skills. So those are the things which are coming up in the other webinar, and again we welcome your feedback on that tonight. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Simon if you want to take us through the webinar.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, just to introduce myself, Simon Kirkland. Work for Sports Structures. I've also got my colleague Mark Knight, who's supporting the workshop. Just really sort of engagement rules, so to speak. If you could keep yourself on mute, that'd be good. But later on in the workshop, we want to actually open it up for questions. So if you have got questions, one or two ways you can do that: either store that up for when we open up the microphones, etc., and have a conversation. But also if you use the chat box, which you can see on your toolbar in front of you, click the one that shows chat box, and we're happy for you to put things in there all the way through. And colleagues online already will hopefully be able to help that. We'll also be putting links in there to various things, etc., that might be able to help you. But the main basis of it is to look at giving you information about funding and giving you information about how you can help yourselves through these sort of difficult times. It might be that you already know this and it just confirms what you're doing is the right thing. It might be that this is new to you and this gives you an opportunity of looking at sustaining the club sport during this period, and hopefully when we get out into the big wonderful world of sport again, we'll be in in a position to be able to maximise that. So Sport England have been really good, really supportive, and come out very quickly with levels of support. The first one that we're going to concentrate on a lot tonight is the emergency fund, which has been open for a few weeks now, and we'll give a little bit more detail about that. And some of you may have applied for that. I mean, if you have applied for that and you've been successful, or otherwise, if you want to pop in the chat box, that'd be really helpful, because I think, you know, those that have gone through the process and been successful will be really good. So we're gonna have a look at that. The other support that Sport England are giving is support to organisations already in receipt of funding and the flexible working of that, and additional support on that. And then finally, which will come out in the coming month or so, which is very difficult to predict what it will be, because we don't know what the new world looks like. It will be a £55 million fund, which would be around looking at supporting getting back into participation. So everything here, the emergency fund, those other two funds, spins back round to making sure that we've still got sports participation to the level that we had before. So I don't know if the person just joined us, if you could pop it on mute, that'd be really good, because it's just getting a little bit of echo back. But yeah, so those are the three main areas, and the emergency fund is really about mitigating loss that's directly been taken now because of the drop off in sports participation. It's not about what in the future, it's about now. So Mark, I don't know if you move on to the next slide. This is it's not quite up to date, but these are the levels of funding and things that are coming through, and the fund's been eaten away. Niall, could you just give us a quick sort of update on where we are with the fund in terms of levels of uptake, etc.?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Simon. Evening, everyone. Niall Jarrett from Sport England. So just to kind of give you a bit more context on those numbers, they've jumped up a little bit since those numbers are there. So we've had over 7,000 applications now for the fund. We've assessed about 4,350 of them, which is it's good going. And we've been able to approve just over 3,000 of those. On average, the requested amount that we've got coming in is now about 5,800, just around that. And we're just around the £10 million mark in terms of what we've been able to pay out so far.
Super. And the sports that we're hearing that are getting most of that funding in terms of cricket, football, bowls, tennis, boxing, and they're sort of mitigating their losses and identifying what a direct loss to them at this period of time around rent, etc. So we'll move on to the next slide, Mark, and in here it identifies what is being funded and what isn't being funded. And there really is the application process is very, very simple. There's 4 questions around what are you doing, what's the loss, and what impact that will be. And really, it is also about identifying your club. Have you got reserves? Are you investing those reserves in making sure that you're keeping going? But what it won't do is fund income that you've lost. It's really directly about the impact that it's directly having. Tina, I don't know if you could put a bit more flavour on that at all in terms of what is being funded at all.
Yes, certainly. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tina Pilkington from Sport England, and I'm actually supporting with the assessment of the applications. I think has already been said, it's not about, we absolutely realise that clubs at the moment are losing on income and subscriptions and memberships. What we can't do is replace those and that money that you're losing, but what the fund is really trying to do is to pay your outgoings that you'd have to pay, so things like rent, utility bills, actual costs that you still need to cover, but you haven't got the income coming in to actually enable you to do that.
Will it also support things like if they've purchased stock, for example, a club's got perishable goods, whether it's beer or whether it's other things like that, that actually because the club's not open, it's making a loss and having to get rid of that stock. Would it support that at all?
It won't. No, it's not actually eligible for stock. Yeah.
So I think that probably drops into where the club looks at its insurances and things like that, probably. Yeah. Okay. And I think on the slide you can see what's not going to be funded and the organisations are not being, but this is really targeted at sports clubs and sports organisations. Again, it's organised sports organisations that are not necessarily affiliated to governing bodies, but there are obviously a lot of sports clubs that are. It's also looking at multi-sports clubs that maybe have a number of sports clubs that use their facility and might be a charitable trust or a company limited by guarantee that actually the sports are unable to put into their organisation that could put in a risk of that charitable organisation running. Mark, do you want to just move on to the next slide, because I think it gives us a little bit more around that fund criteria. And obviously, if you are can identify that this will affect participation, and particularly amongst underrepresented groups, women and girls, those with a disability, black and ethnic minorities, or from a particular client group where that group is going to be severely affected by this, or is unlikely to run or be organised, or somebody organise that afterwards. And this could be an organisation that runs just a sports activity on one day of the week, and maybe there is an impact on their provision that possibly they're directly getting a loss on that particular time that they would be normally paying out that they can't pay out anymore. So if there are any questions around that, please pop them in the chat box, because Niall and Tina will be able to sort of answer that. Or if there are any questions, we'll hold verbally. They're a bit more complex, then happy to sort of pick up on those a little bit later. But please store them up, and we'll hopefully add later in the webinar. So I'd also be useful if any of you online now have applied for this. Sorry, I lost my connection there. Is want in these times. So you can see the funding criteria, and hopefully that will give you a really clear guidance. I mean, if you could put in the chat box if any of you have applied for this fund and been successful or otherwise, that'd be really useful for us to know, and would be good information for Lancashire Sport to know who has made those applications and been successful, albeit that Sport England are providing that information on a portal that's available now. Mark, do you want to just pop the link to the Sport England site where all that information is, and then people can see all the application, they can see the application form, and also see some of those that have been successful. It's very, very clear on there, the funding criteria, and Sport England have been very, very overt and very clear about what is funding and whatever. So I think some top tips there around making sure that you're really direct. You've got a limit of 900 words on describing what the impact is. The fund does not want to know that you were formed in 1927 or whatever, and have got a great strong tradition and produced England internationals or whatever. They really want to know what you've been doing recently, and what is the impact of this close down on you, and being very clear. Also, supporting documentation is not weighed. It's really got to be quite relevant. So if you're saying you're putting some of your reserves in, then it'd be worthwhile putting in your accounts or a statement of accounts to prove that. It's really important that you make the case, but make the case directly about this. Tina and her colleagues, as Niall said earlier, have gone through 7,000. I think Niall said earlier, normally Sport England over a whole year will be dealing with about 4,000 applications. So they've really geared up. Any other top tips that you could give, Tina, at all on this one?
Yeah, I just say to all clubs, think about, is it an emergency? Is the first thing. You know, have you got savings there, or are there other sources of funding? And just be honest on the application. Every application is different, and it is case by case. If there are savings there, let us know what the intended use of them is for. We absolutely appreciate that a lot of clubs and organisations will have savings in the bank. So yeah, just be honest with us and tell us what they're for.
But you're not wanting to see that the club's spending all their savings. It might just be an element of those savings, but accounting that they've also got to keep some cash for, you know, when things do come back. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it is the club making a commitment there. I think, you know, the top tips there you can see, and say we're recording this, so we will be making the recording available, so you can go back and look at these top tips. I mean, if there are any questions, please pop them through, and we'll answer them as we go, or save them up towards the end.
Sorry, Simon, there are just a couple of kind of observations from the chat box. So there have been a couple of successful applications which Jill Ashcroft and Jane Green have put in. They didn't get the full amount, but it will obviously go towards any immediate kind of cost losses that they're experiencing. Omar has also put in that he's had feedback that he was unsuccessful, and they're asking the question if they can apply again, which is something we had this morning. Niall and Tina, could you just confirm that? Like you did.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of repeat what we said earlier. So if you have been unsuccessful, and we don't have any of the details around why people are, but if you've been unsuccessful and perhaps you've just not met the criteria or there's something different, to apply again, you would, if you don't fit the criteria in the first time, it might be quite difficult to do. If you feel obviously there's been some misunderstanding, or actually you feel you're giving more context, then you feel you can apply, but just make sure that you wait for the feedback that you get from the team. So I think you can email to ask for that feedback, and they'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Simon very shortly is going to go through some other funding opportunities and avenues. So, if you are unsuccessful with us, there are other opportunities for which you can go down.
The two clubs that have been successful, would one of you like to come on and just unmute yourself and just really quickly just describe what you gained the funding for?
I don't mind coming on this.
Yeah, super.
We're a gymnastics club with a membership predominantly of young children aged from 4 years old up to 18 years old, actually. And we have a number in excess of 15 adult volunteers as well. We're based up in Shadsworth, and we are completely voluntary as an organisation, the committee, coaches, and we obviously have rent to pay for the facility that we have from the landlord. The landlord had said to us that we could get a holiday on the rent. However, the full amount will still need to be paid eventually. So this was where our issues started to come in, because our funds from gymnasts subs weren't coming in, yet the rent was still going out as well as other costs. We did have funds in a reserve, but this was put to one side for fundraising that had been gained initially. So we felt that we were able to use some of the funds, but not all of the funds, because obviously being in Blackburn Darwen, the club actually pays for a lot of the costs for gymnastics, the competitions, the equipment and the likes. So to be sustainable, there was a need for some of the funds to remain in place, which was explained in the application. Yeah. So we didn't get the full amount, but the amount that we have received has been very greatly received. There's been a few WhatsApps go around this evening celebrating. We did in the application go into great detail as to the demographics of our membership. A lot of girls, but similarly a lot of boys, and new members from sort of the minority ethnicities as well, which is new for us as a club. And as a club, we'd just started expanding and only recently moved into a bigger facility, so we were all on an incremental rent increase as well. So it was a very worrying time. So this is it. The acknowledgement of the funding has come at a brilliant time, actually, for us.
Yeah, brilliant. How long did it take to get your response?
It took probably about, it was over 14 days, over 2 weeks. I think we're going into 3 or 4 weeks, to be honest. Yeah. Which
actually is unusual, because I think they're turning the applications around in 8 to 10 days. But I think there are, obviously there's a huge number of applications coming in. But
yeah, I think
brilliant. Thank you very much.
We applied at Easter, so if that was the case for other people, I think there obviously is a bit of a lag.
Yeah, brilliant. Don't know if the other person who said they got a grant, whether they want to just.
Hi, yeah, it's Jane Green here.
Hi, Jane.
I'm from Fenny Scholes and Pleasington Recreation Ground, as the shortened version, or Fenny Rec as it's affectionately known locally. So we have different teams with bowling, cricket, junior football, senior football, tennis, and we recently took on a new groundsman. His start date was the 6th of April, so we couldn't furlough him, and we'd also cancelled some groundworks that we needed to have done. So our application was based on that. We applied for quite a bit more, I would say, than we got, but it's allowed us to do, well, to put the groundworks back in motion, or it will do once we've got the funding paid, but it's been approved, and it helps us towards paying the groundsman's costs, because obviously we didn't want to stop him working. Really, he'd left one job to come to us, so we felt that we were honour bound to carry on with his employment, but that was leaving us really quite tight.
But you were using some of your reserves to help.
We are very tightly run, and we don't have any reserves in great amounts. We do have restricted funds because we're a charity, so yes. We have restricted funds for which is for the heritage site on there. So we couldn't spend that on the stuffing, on the stuff that we would have done if it had been free to spend, if you would.
And presumably the rent, in effect, the rent from the users is not coming in, and that's
there's no income coming in from the sports section at the minute, and that's held. Well, we've held that in abeyance. We would be expecting our summer sports, or the bowls, tennis and cricket, to be paying something, but it depends where it goes. We haven't made a decision on whether to ask those clubs for any money, but I doubt we will expect the usual amount from them.
But you've got to protect the organisation, and that's I think the challenge and the basis of the funding. Would you like to say how long it took you from application to receiving the?
I think successful... it probably took about 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
It's sort of looking at a bit longer.
Just over 10 days. To be fair, days.
When it came back, when I submitted the application and it said people would come back to me within 8 to 10 days, I did think that was rather ambitious, thinking that there would be thousands of applicants. So I wasn't over worried.
Yeah. But pleased when you got the email then.
Extremely pleased, and turned it straight round to ask for the money, and then we can get the work done. Yeah. So
lovely, thank you, Jane. That's really useful. Super, thank you. If we move on to sort of the next little bit, which is a bit around fundraising. I think what this throws into absolute highlight is maybe, or could, clubs look at other sources of funding and raising other fundraising. I know clubs do fundraising all the time, but I think there's some real opportunities. Darren, do you want to just expand on this a little bit, because I think you got some good examples of some crowdfunding?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Just in particular, my name's Darren, and I work with Beth at Active Lancashire. We've been supporting some clubs, as Simon mentioned, and it's great to hear that some of the successes with the emergency fund have come through, so that's great for Lancashire. What we have seen, though, as Simon mentioned, is a lot of clubs are looking at fundraising, and your typical kind of fundraising that you probably normally do when you need a rainy day, you can't quite do, because obviously with social distancing and government guidelines. So what a lot of clubs have done is set up fundraising pages, Just Giving, Crowdfunder, GoFundMe, etc. And it's a really good way that if some of your members perhaps can't afford to pay fees to continue and look at whether they want a club at the end of the lockdown, and some are prepared to sort of pay some kind of support to the club, it's a really good way to set that up and not differentiate between different members that can and can't afford to pay. So across Lancashire, we've had a couple of clubs that have asked us to help promote some of their pages, and we've done that. For example, in Nelson Football Club, they've set up a Just Giving page. I think they're up to about 1,200 quid now. So just amounts like that just really do help the coffers in this time of crisis.
I think the other thing that's coming out from clubs quite across the country is that actually members really want to make sure that their club is still going. And actually, they're quite happy to donate in a lot of cases, or or you know, use a formalised sort of funding stream like as Darren's just described, or look at you know, actually paying their membership. And I think the membership bits have fallen into sort of three areas. Some clubs have maintained their membership at the higher level. Some have given a discount, and some have just gone a base level where people continue to just pay their membership. I think also there's sort of differences between winter and summer sports as well. A lot of the winter sports are pretty much finished, and so actually their membership fees were all paid up. But I think summer sports are being challenged now about whether they should charge their members a membership fee. Obviously they can't charge a match fee or anything like that, but certainly looking at a membership fee, because people are keen to keep the club going and making sure the club's there. So I think don't be embarrassed about talking to your members about raising money for the club or contributing in. I mean, if you've got any fundraising ideas or things that have been successful, again, please pop them in the chat box, because I think if we can share those across the network, it'd be really, really useful. And I think the great thing about voluntary sport is it will still be here after this crisis is finished. In what form it will be in is a different form, but you know, clubs do find all sorts of different ways of fundraising. So if you have got any ideas, just pop them in the chat box, and we can share that across this network and the other groups of clubs that were part of the lunchtime session as well. So yeah, do you want to crack on, Mark, and then looking at other support? And I think Darren and Beth, if you'd like to just maybe put a little bit of flavour on this, because it's very much Lancashire led. I think Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Just to come back in, yeah, we've obviously been doing quite a bit of research behind the scenes in terms of what available support is for different types of organisations, charities, businesses that are kind of run as clubs, including CICs. There's lots of stuff out there. There's a couple of documents that we have found that are really useful just to go through and have a look at what funds are available, and we will send them. Beth will send them out with the evaluation stuff after the webinar. A couple of ones that are on the slide there. Grant Finder is quite useful just to sort of really go up and have a look at the tool and how it works. And then we've also got the Lancashire Community Foundation, grants up to £5,000 available. And this is probably not to cover your costs and all your losses, etc. But if clubs are looking at doing things a little bit differently in the time of crisis, or I'm picking an example, if clubs are looking at providing hot meals for their local community in hard to reach kind of areas, then potentially that is some support that could help that club as well. And then at the bottom we've got the Boost support. So Boost is an ERDF funded programme really helping sort of Lancashire businesses grow. Now what they've kind of done through the crisis is change their goalposts and provided a bit more support for general business crisis really through this time. So they are accepting any sort of offering any support that clubs kind of need that are set up as businesses. So that is a key thing. They have to be set up as businesses, and that is including CIC. So for things like golf clubs, for example, that set up as private enterprises, some cricket clubs I know are set up as CIC. So potentially there's a bit of support there that those kind of organisations could access some support.
Are there any on that? I know there are a number of coaches that are self-employed that might have set up as a company as opposed to self-employed, and are paying themselves a dividend rather than a salary. Would they? Are you aware if they'd be able to access that at all, or?
Possibly if it's a company that could be growth. I'm not sure about the self-employed bit. It is really there for businesses and growing businesses, but obviously during the crisis, businesses aren't looking at growth. They're looking at being sustainable really post the COVID.
Yeah, unless you're a supermarket. Yeah, which is brilliant. Thanks, Darren. If it move on to sort of the next say that, and just other support that's available. And I think for those of you that are up to speed, there is whole sort of governmental system that's, you know, what, quite honest, one of the best in the world in terms of supporting organisations. So if you employ people and they're on the payroll at the time that was announced, they moved that date. Obviously, there's a furlough scheme. I think some clubs have had challenges because they're a membership club and maybe they're using an accountant or a third party to employ their coach or an administrator or something. It is for that third party to furlough that person. So the job retention schemes and the loans, again, changes in the loans for those under £50,000 changed in the last week or so, that government are 100% guaranteeing that, which enables you in the first year not to pay any capital or interest back. But please be careful and look at the interest rates of when you go past a year, because there are banks that are charging up to 40%. Generally, you know, the major banks are around 3 to 5%, depending on the current state of the business. But also then looking at the rate relief and then rate relief grants and come back. I don't know. I know we've got a number of clubs that are asset owning. They might be on peppercorn rental and actually got rate relief already. But if there are any clubs that have received that grant back, that'd be really interesting to know. We are aware of a number of the multi-sports type clubs that have received rate relief back that have not been receiving either rate relief through cash status or charitable status. But it'd be interesting to know if any clubs are receiving that back. So those are the sort of governmental support bits, and certainly there's a lot of information on the government sites, and we've got links there. And as Darren said, Beth and Mark will send through either on the chat box or afterwards. I mean, any questions on those, just pop them in the chat box, and we're more than happy to help. And there you see the some of the links that are available. So government have been really supportive to make sure that business is doing their best job. But I think, you know, the Chancellor said a couple of times, we can't support every member of staff and every company. And I know that there are some of smaller businesses that are really struggling. But again, self-employed status, you know, make sure that you're up to date and have submitted your accounts. And I think there was a little bit of a leeway on submitting accounts, and a flexibility if you've only been registered for under 3 years. But again, that's a support that will come in. The self-employed status money will come in June, but then there's an opportunity of that self-employed person claiming universal credit, albeit it's not massive, but that will be offset when you receive your payment in June, and that's the information from government. So those are the other supports available, and please pop in questions in the chat box or store them up for a few more minutes. So if you want to just move on a little bit, Mark, then. Yeah, super. So we've got some sort of standards to the questions there that are coming out. Beth, do you want to put a bit more flavour on those and the sort of responses that we're getting for those?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat box, and there's some people who've received rate relief, so that's really good to hear. Was that fairly easy? Can anyone kind of come back in terms of that? Was that fairly easy to get? Please
unmute yourself and speak away if you've got your...
Hi, sorry, it's Jane Green again here. As far as I'm aware, the rate relief is done automatically. We didn't apply for it. I think it just happened.
I think, yeah, government gave the local authority the money, and they should, in theory, automatically send that, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anybody who's got rate relief, just want to come off mute and just let us know.
Yeah, it's the same for us as well. We just got contacted by the council and issued the funding.
Yeah. And helpful?
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Big relief, especially because we didn't get the initial funding request from Sport England as well. It was a yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah, you can't go down the pub and spend it. That's the problem.
No, but we can still carry on though.
Yeah, it keeps you going for sure. Yeah, Yeah. Any others that received the rate relief that want to just sort of let us know about it? Okay, well, let's just expand out on these questions because they're about engaging and etc. Any, Beth, I know you've got some examples of where this has been acted upon in Lancashire. Do you want to give us a little bit of bits and bobs on that?
Yeah, so we've kind of formatted this because our a little bit more at home campaign is based around the 5 ways to wellbeing. So one of the ways that we're looking at connecting with for organisations to connect with the members is that some of the feedback we've had is particularly around young people, is how to connect and upskill digitally to do that. So one of our Carol within our team, she's got in touch with Lancashire Adult Learning, who've confirmed that they will be happy to run a webinar to give top tips on engaging with young people and adults as well digitally, and the right platforms to do so. So that's something which we are going to go down if ever, if people feel that would be useful. Other areas, as I said before, on the chat box, Darren had mentioned around a clubs forum, again, to connect all different organisations together and hear best practice. That's an idea which we're going to look into through a webinar type situation. And also we touched on kind of planning ahead, planning for the future. And I know Jill and somebody else in the last webinar had said that business planning would be an area as well, which clubs and organisations would welcome at this time, really. So just any feedback on that would be much appreciated.
Also, just on that earlier point around delivering coaching sessions, whether it's conditioning sessions or technical sessions online, there are, a number of governing bodies have got guidelines. I know Swimming Rugby have put some specific guidelines around running sessions through Zoom or GoToMeeting or YouTube, and there's some really good guidance on not sticking that link out on social media, because you could be hacked and have all sorts of infiltrations into it which are inappropriate coaching children. The other bit as well, and we'll send it through, we've got a list of governing bodies and the links specifically on their web pages to where they are giving guidance on running sessions and activities. Pardon me. It's also really important to check that the people that you're coaching are in a safe environment and not sort of climbing over the kitchen table or wherever, but actually they're in a safe environment that can be effectively delivered. And a lot of governing bodies will give advice on if their insurance covers them and in terms of that coaching session. So it's making sure that the environment that whoever's taking part is safe, and that then comes under the insurance. But just to say, if a coach is furloughed, they'll be unable to do any coaching or any development of their coaching programs whilst they are furloughed. They can undertake training, which is training for themselves, but they can't do any, so they can't deliver any training. But what they can do though is volunteer, and there's been some little bits around groundsmen volunteering into other grounds and things like that. So there's an opportunity to volunteer, but you can't volunteer back into the club that you're employed by. It's got to be volunteering elsewhere. I think the concept is that you volunteer into other areas. People also can do work elsewhere if they're lucky to do that. So again, we'll send through in the chat box and afterwards some answers around social media and training and also keeping connected. I mean, if you're interested in that, then please put your interest in the chat box, or drop an email back on the email that came out from Beth identifying this evening's session. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box, and challenges, then more than happy to address. And I think clubs now are moving from that, how do we make sure we don't go bust, to actually now looking at planning for the future. and that's where clubs appear to be at. And there's ideal opportunities now to bring your constitution up to date. You get all your coaches up to date on safeguarding. UK Coaching have put the face-to-face workshop online, and the Child Protection Sport Unit are accepting that online workshop can supersede the fact of needing to do a face-to-face one. But if it's your first safeguarding workshop when you renew in 3 years' time, you will have to do a face-to-face workshop in that sense. At the moment, if you're interested in the Time to Listen course, the Child Protection Sport Unit have not released that as yet as an online workshop, so that would be on hold. What we also identified earlier is that some sports will be putting DBS checks on hold or just extending them for a period of time whilst this situation goes on, and we found that with a couple of sports today. So if there are any questions, then please pop them in the chat box. I don't know if there's any there that we can answer now. Beth, I don't know if any have come up there.
No, there's one from Darren, but to Niall and Tina about if they've received government support, can they still apply for Sport England?
The emergency funding.
Yeah.
Just to confirm it, really, whether I think through the guidance that they can't apply, but just in case clubs are looking at applying for Sport England and haven't seen the guidance in full detail, really.
Yeah. Tina, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to do it?
I'm happy to. I think our guidelines say that if there is other government funding that a club can apply for, they should apply for that first. Obviously, if they've applied for that and there are still outgoings or things that they need to pay for, and it's that emergency, then put an application in. But certainly all other sources of funding should be sought before they come to the community emergency fund.
I think the question also revolves if they're receiving a Sport England grant for an application, can they also apply for the emergency fund?
Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't stop them from applying if they need that funding.
Right. Was that the basis of the question, Darren? I think.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Simon. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. We'll move on. I think Mark.
Yeah, just another observation on that.
Sure.
I think it's been sorted out, but Jane was after some website advice and somebody to kind of set that up on Club Matters. Niall, is that which obviously goes on to the next slide? Is that something which it kind of spells out how to set up a website? Or is this
very good? It is a very good question. I'm not particularly certain that we have anything around setting up a website. I think we primarily have things around how you can maximise the use of social media. Oh, no, correct me, I'm wrong. I do have a website thing. Yeah, I'll pop the link in, but it doesn't go into loads and loads of detail about the mechanics of how you do it. It kind of looks at, is it right to have a website? Is that the best medium for you, or is there other ways to do it? So, yeah, if there's more local support, if you do want to pursue setting up a website, then you please do. But the things from Club Matters is a bit more around what's the pros and cons, and then kind of point you towards social media in terms of what can that do for you that maybe a website can or can't.
Okay.
Does that help, Jane? Does that help, Jane? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Another question from me, sorry, Simon, was right. Just going to be, obviously this webinar was geared more around those with assets. So I just didn't know if there was any specific questions that any of the organisations and clubs had around that.
Specifically around the buildings and the fields and the maintenance and running of their fields. Yeah.
Possibly even kind of practical advice that they might require around, what do we actually do in terms of shutting up shop and.
I think there were, in talking to other governing bodies nationwide, there's all things about knowing your key holders. So be clear about your key holders. and in one quite shocking case, it was knowing the code for the security alarm, which was a little bit worrying. It's implied that it wasn't on. There have also been sort of inquiries into governing bodies about whether they can have a short-term holiday with Sky, as they have Sky in the clubhouse. And so there are all things like that that might help with the not necessarily the closing down, but sort of mothballing of the clubhouse in the period of time. The other bit that also has come out around insurance is if you have insurance that insures contents within your clubhouse and within the club facility, if you've taken things out of the clubhouse that would normally be in, just check that your insurance covers for goods that are away from the clubhouse, because they might fall out of that insurance. The other insurance is that looking about non-occupancy of the building. Sometimes insurance will have things in there around the period of time that the facility needs to be checked. So in some cases with summer sports, they will have that built in around the winter, having to make sure that somebody checks the building every certain period of time. But just check that covers that area as well. So the key thing around, are the goods that you've taken out of the clubhouse that normally would be in there, that are insured because they're in the building. Just check that they're still insured when you've taken away. In a lot of cases, you'll have a threshold on that, but also again check around the non-occupancy, which hopefully covers up one or two of things around the capital assets. Any other questions around those at all?
Yeah, Simon, do you want me to just pick up on a couple of extra things just on Beth's point? So if you are an asset owning club or you do have facilities, there's a couple of things that I've just popped in the chat box. So on Club Matters, we've got a securing your premises checklist, which can kind of refer to the kind of things that obviously hopefully that you've done, but again, do not kind of look at that and go, oh no, panic, must go out actually because you're still around essential travel. But it's really useful if you flip it on its head, but you're opening your premises checklist. And also I popped a link on there for anyone who does things around ground maintenance, because I know there's lots of questions around, am I allowed to go and tend my grounds at this time and look after my cricket pitches or send people in? So there's some guidance from the Institute of Groundsmanship, who have done some kind of interim works guidance for a range of different sports to try and help you be clear on what you are and are not allowed to do, because we've got lots of stories of groundsmen being stopped by the police because it's not deemed as essential, but we're getting some further clarity on what they are allowed and not allowed to do.
Super, thanks, Niall. Any other questions from clubs at all on those? Either pop them in the chat box or happy for you to open up the microphone and ask the question if it's a little bit more complex.
Simon, just Darren again. It's on the in the chat box. I've just popped in there a website, really useful website, charityexcellence.co.uk, and it basically takes a couple of minutes to register, but you get access to all the live funding that's available. Really worth signing up and having a look. There's a bit of a filter system on there as well that you can filter down to. I'm just picking up on some of the conversations this morning, particularly like around bowls clubs that are potentially worried about sort of members coming back or a bit sceptical about coming back after the lockdown, and just whether some of the funding that potentially is available may not help in an emergency, but looking at potentially future-proofing club in terms of new avenues of participation or new avenues of business kind of thing in terms of how it's run. So really useful tool there. And then just one more thing to add around satellite clubs. So we obviously run the satellite clubs in Lancashire, and we've still got some scope in terms of availability for satellite clubs. So if clubs are potentially thinking of diversifying in the future and looking at a new wave of participants that are going to be eager to get involved in clubs after lockdown, again, useful conversation we've got Ronan that can help you and support you with that. And I'll pop his contact details in the chat box as well for you.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for sweeping up from this morning. Just a final slide really on Club Matters that we're involved with in relation to Sport England, and we've got 6 workshops that are free. And I think if clubs are getting in the mindset of actually looking at planning for the future and or looking at, you know, taking this downtime to have a get a mirror out and look at themselves, these are excellent opportunities to do this. So the 6 workshops look at the legal structure, the governance structure, the legal structure of the club, whether it's unincorporated members or whether it should look to become incorporated, and the advantages, disadvantages of being a charity, and looking at gift aid as well. Then leadership teams, which is looking at your main board, your main committee, how does it operate, how does it work, and how do you maybe, if need be, bringing new experts from outside. We've got a marketing workshop that looks at giving clubs an idea of putting together a marketing plan, whether that's internally or externally marketing. There's a workshop around developing, recruiting, retaining, recognising volunteers. One around participant experience, whether you are understanding what your participants want, and this I think is really quite relevant at the moment. You know, what do participants want when they come back out of this? And then the one that's the most popular at the moment, which is looking at planning for the future and looking at addressing some key issues around the current situation, but also then looking at, right, how do we plan a better club, not just around the sports element, but looking at the finances, looking at workforce, looking at facilities, etc. So those are all free. I think Mark will pop the link in the chat box. So no, they're run virtually at the moment, virtual classrooms at the moment, on evenings or in the day. And if there is a need within Lancashire, we'll work with Beth and Darren and colleagues to actually look to set those up, and those can either be sport specific, geographic, or very club specific. So if you are interested in those, Mark will pop that link in the chat box. But also, you know, please inquire about those. And there's an open workshops which are nationally run, and then we could also run them locally, which obviously we can do virtually and without being there, if that makes sense. So those are Club Matters website. Also on the Club Matters website, Niall's related to a couple of links there. There is a massive information around running your club, helping to run your club, whether it's the governance structure, whether it's planning. There's some tools there to carry out surveys. It's a really quite significant website, and like Niall, I'd go on there occasionally and suddenly find things that I didn't know about, and I thought I knew about the Club Matters website. So there's a significant amount of information. So that sort of brings us around to sort of tying up the workshop really. And it's now sort of open house. We really want to know, and Beth and colleagues really want to know what you want as clubs. And I think we've mentioned a few of the things earlier that came out of the webinar this lunchtime, which was about social media and how to engage, how to run sessions while in this lockdown period, planning and putting things in place for the future, trying to plan for when things come out. There's also things around volunteers and maybe an opportunity to develop volunteers. So if you have got any questions, either pop them in the chat box or open your microphone and speak to the Lancashire network. Please fire away.
No.
Anybody? Anything coming up there?
Okay, I can. So I'm talking from Audley Sports and Community Centre in Blackburn. I'm in the moment in a bit of a struggle. So we run as a volunteer group that help manage it. We have staff working under us which are furloughed, so they're okay. But in terms of our business and running the community centre itself, without any kind of income, we're still paying expenses. You know, we've got electricity bill, gas bill, water bill, insurance, telephone lines. I contacted the internet a lot. They said, no, you still have to carry on paying. We won't give any kind of holiday, because we've got two different internet, one with Wi-Fi for the public and one for the actual staff. They said, yeah, we can't do nothing with that. So our electricity company, understanding their charge and stuff like that, couldn't do anything, because I was trying to look at ways of how to reduce costs, because at the moment apparently we're not eligible for the small grant funding.
The Sport England grant?
No, the small business grant from the...
Oh, I see. Yeah, the governmental grant.
Yeah, so apparently because our rateable value is too high for that. So we're not actually...
Are any of your sessions, are they sporting sessions that are closed down, and the income from that, you're not getting any income, and therefore, but you've still got the overheads coming in?
Yes, exactly. And obviously this period as well for us would be parties and weddings as well, that are sort of our main sustainable income that comes in to actually run our centre, because our charges are, for where we are based, are very cheap, or fairly cheap, I think, competitive, just to be, because of the area we're in, and we want to keep it that way. But obviously the weddings, parties, are the kind of things that help run the centre, and at the moment, obviously, we've had to cancel them. We'll have to refund them, and that's going to be over.
Could I ask you what is the impact on the sporting activities?
So obviously with all the sporting activities, they've all stopped now. So that stops all the youth club, the boxing clubs, it stops all the badminton sessions and the ladies netball sessions. We've also the ladies fitness classes that have all stopped as well.
And is there income coming, or would normally come from that group? So does the weddings and other events, do they support, they make sure that you can underwrite and support the sporting activities?
Yeah, exactly. So they all help, but we do sort of charge for it, but it's fairly cheap. You know, we charge for the holiday club, you know, £2.50. We charge sort of for a fitness class £3.
And is that lack of income, both from the weddings and the other events and the sporting activity, is that putting in jeopardy the running of the community centre then?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the main issue now, is how we're going to carry on paying. You know, if it carries on for months and months, how are we going to carry on paying for that? You know, and for me to understand then, not just for myself, for the staff, for the committee that's all involved, you know, how are we going to sort of go forward, and how are we going to look forward without actually having any kind of funding in place for this?
So I think I think it's looking at those sporting activities and the impact on losing those sporting activities. If you could quantify that, and so it's not about whether you make a profit, but it is maybe about what are those running costs. Is that, Tina, and it's very difficult for Tina because she's an assessor, is that the sort of area that could be submitted into the Sport England grant, Tina?
I can't really comment on individual cases, and
for sure,
obviously Omar's already, I think, applied, haven't you? And it's been rejected. I think, as you said in the chat earlier, appeal and then see what the feedback is, because it might be whatever has been seen in the application hasn't given the whole picture of what you do. So yeah, it's just worthwhile obviously getting back in touch and taking it from there.
Yeah, I'm trying to arrange a meeting with someone to discuss exactly what it was, and then sort of take it from there, and for the sort of either know then what's the next step on either appealing it or actually, well, I've already appealed it, but
I think the critical thing, Omar, is what's the impact on sporting participation? And if there's a real impact on women and girls and young people and different groups who informally take part and will only take part in that community centre, I think that's the stronger. But again, you know, it still might not be eligible. But I think that bit around the impact on the sporting activities is really, really critical. Okay, hopefully that helps. Any other questions that we've got from anybody else? Okay, brilliant. But it'd be useful if you could just pop in the chat box now whether you found this session useful, and more importantly, how else, what other support would you like? Would you like, as was mentioned this morning, a forum of clubs that can just discuss and share good practice, particularly around fundraising and generating more participation? I think also when as and when we're clear about what's going to happen when things get released, I think then there'll be guidelines from Sport England around the £55 million fund, and then it's about how are we activating participation, whether it's on an informal basis or through events and celebration events and things like that. So we'll be clear about that. But it'd be useful if you could put if you found this webinar useful, and also if anything that you would like in the future, as Beth mentioned early on, Lancashire, Active Lancashire here to support and give that networking opportunity, but also give some direct support. So hopefully you found the webinar useful and giving you some good information, and all the links, etc. we'll send afterwards as well as you can pick them up through the webinar. Anything further, Beth, did you like to add to tie the webinar up?
Just to touch on that slide, really, that I'll be sending the survey out after this. Just it's very brief. It's only 2 questions with what you've just described, Simon. So what have you found most valuable, but also what areas of support do you think would be most useful for you? And also the relationship manager contacts at Active Lancashire, so you know who your contact is depending on the area that you're living in Lancashire. And the funding FAQs will go out next week alongside this presentation and the recording and things, so you can send it on to whoever you wish. And that's it, really. So thank you very much for everybody for listening in, and it's been kind of an active discussion, really, so it's been really useful.
I think they'll also get the recording of the lunchtime edition, which was slightly different, but this group in the evening are far better than the lunchtime group, I think. It's because they're online at the moment. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. If you'd like to just pop anything in the chat box, any questions, any thoughts, whether it's been worthwhile, that'd be useful, just to make sure that it's worthwhile us doing. And thank you very much, and have a good evening, and hopefully we'll see you again when things get a little bit easier to take part in sport. Thanks to Niall, Tina, Mark, Darren and Beth for their input. It's been really good.